Call the March 14th meeting of the Traffic Review Advisory Board meeting to order. Good afternoon and welcome. The Traffic Review Board reviews items of interest regarding parking and traffic items. We are an advisory board, and our favorable recommendations today will go before the Oshkosh Common Council. The council can accept or reject any recommendation from this board. If you don't agree with our decision, you can discuss the item with any council member. If the board does not recommend an item, a common council member may sponsor a new ordinance regarding that item. All items require 2 readings before the common council. The first reading will take place on Tuesday, March 28th at 6 p.m. and you will be allowed to comment on the item at that time, though the council will take no action. On Tuesday, April 11th at 6 p.m., the item will be on a second reading, at which time the council will in fact take action. You will again be allowed to speak. For this afternoon's meeting, I will read each agenda item, at which time if you'd like to speak, please step up to the podium and give your name and address. I do ask that you keep your comments pertinent to the agenda item. The item will then come back to this board for discussion and action. Please call the roll.
Stepanek?
Here.
Weinschneider?
Here.
Becker?
Here.
Christensen? Absent. Haas?
Here.
Ross?
Here.
Szynski?
Here.
First item on this afternoon's agenda is approval of prior minutes. For second,
Second.
any discussion, questions, additions, deletions? Seeing none, please call the roll on approval of minutes.
Stepanek?
Aye.
Weinschneider?
Aye.
Becker?
Aye.
Haas?
Aye.
Ross?
Aye.
Szynski?
Aye.
Next item on today's agenda is public comment. The board has adopted a public policy participation arrangement, which provides 15 minutes for the general public to comment on a first-come, first-served basis. Citizens must provide their name and address and may speak on matters related to traffic issues within the authority of this board. Statements should be addressed to the board members and not to staff or other persons. Items that are on the agenda should be addressed at the time the item is read and not during the period for public comment. Statements are limited to 3 minutes, and citizens may only provide comment one time unless special permission is granted by the board. Does anyone wish to avail themselves of the opportunity? Seeing none, moving to new business. First item, a request to allow electric personal assistive mobility devices in bike lanes. Current condition, not allowed.
Okay, this is in conjunction with our special events process. We have a company, Glide NEW LLC, who Nick, the representative, is here. But they're looking to provide Segway Tours in Oshkosh. And they've come up with a proposed route, which there might be some variance there. But currently did some research and talking with our staff. Wisconsin statute defines a Segway as an electric personal assistive mobility device. So whenever you see that language, they're talking about what in essence is a Segway. And that does not require driver's license or registration. It can legally be driven on a road, sidewalk, or bicycle path. The statutes say people operating a Segway on a bicycle path or sidewalk shall exercise due care and give an audible signal when passing another rider or pedestrian proceeding in the same direction. Doing some research, it does not appear that other Wisconsin municipalities have regulated those beyond the state statutes. So we've discussed it internally with the police chief, and the parks director and I have talked about it. And the collective opinion is we don't see the need to regulate those beyond the state statutes. However, in our municipal code, in our bike lane language, we do have language in there that prohibits them in bike lanes. So we feel that might be a good place for the Segways, and seeing how as their route is, they'd like to use High and Algoma. So we thought that might be a good location for them. So in order to allow them, then we have to examine that code that we have. So I've put some of the language in your information, but more or less what the codes are saying is that you can operate these electric personal assisted mobility devices, which I'll call Segways, in the You can either ride them on the right-hand side of the street like a bike, or you can ride them on the sidewalk in municipalities where it is legal to ride a bike on a sidewalk. And basically, you have to yield to other bikes and pedestrians. So what we're considering then is whether we should amend our code to allow these segways in the bicycle lanes. So that's what the issue is at hand. And like I said, Nick's here. If there's any questions, he can answer, as well as we have some representatives from the police department, if any concerns that way.
Anyone have any questions? Well, no one else does. I certainly do. And I commented before the meeting, I was glad to see there was a couple of, I believe, sergeants back there. Thank you. As it relates to the use of a Segway on a bike lane, I'm actually concerned about enforcement because, quite honestly, if they're in the bike lane needing to make a left-hand turn, that means they have to cut across traffic. And without any indications, AKA blinkers, are we asking for a problem potentially? I see some safety concerns here is what I'm trying to get at ultimately. So from an enforcement perspective, gentlemen, how does that play? What kind of standard can we hold these folks to for using our streets?
Well, that is a good, that is a concern. I guess by the state statute, it does say they need to follow the rules of the road. And,
How can they though without blinkers is my question.
yes, it's a good question. I also had another question.
Well, how does a bike? I mean, they use hand signals for bike. I mean,
Well,
so-
granted, I've never ridden or even barely looked at a Segway, but does it not take both hands? I know I've seen people using them on TV with coffee in one hand, which is scary, but
You want to, Nick, maybe just step up there?
and to your point, Gary, every kid is, shall we say, indoctrinated with bicycle safety from the time they're 4 or 5. I'm not sure that's the case for a 4-year-old or 44-year-old, shall we say, the first time they're on a Segway.
Yep.
Again, maybe I'm going to learn differently.
This working? It doesn't matter, does it? Okay, as far as the Segway tours that we offer, they are all guided tours, and so the guide does training ahead of time. The Segway only I ride it with no hands sometimes, but a person that has been on it for 5 minutes has no problem with using one hand. So
What's the top speed on a Segway?
12.5 miles an hour. Yeah, so
For a 150-pound individual? I mean,
doesn't matter. Yeah, no. The
well, we all
350-pound person goes 15.5 or 12.5 miles per hour. Yeah, it has a lot of horsepower, so you can maintain that speed at a quite a hill, even so.
Okay. Mm.
I mean, I look at it kind of as same, I would think as far as enforcement, it'd be similar to a bicycle, you know. It's,
You did say, Sergeant, you had another question or another comment?
I just, one more comment on this. We do support the Segway, and we really do. But when we were reading the statute and all that stuff, it would be just following the bicycle signs and signals, verbal, audible. Do you guys have anything on those Segways that are audible?
Just her voice.
Just the voice. Okay, we were just discussing that.
Yeah.
In traffic, I see that as a potential problem. I mean, correct me again if I'm wrong.
Yeah, it could be, but then again, most bicycles, it's gonna be voice also. If we're following the rules of the road as bicycle rules are. So we really don't see that as a major concern. It was just, it was a question that we were talking about. The other one was lighting equipment on the Segways, if it's always in darkness.
Yeah, we don't do tours after dark. We have not done that in the past. There is not lighting, but there are reflective on the wheels on the sides, the front and the back.
What about inclement weather?
Same.
Well, if you're, again, I don't know what your proposed location is, but if you're at the far end of that tour, you could be miles from safety in a thunderstorm. And it's not in the public's best interest to have segways going down our bike lanes in inclement weather with no visual cue. So
Yeah.
what contingency plan is put in play for that?
Yeah, safety is number one. We will adjust our tour. The reason why I hesitated in giving an exact route is because we do adjust our tour depending on the safety in the area that we're at. They're all guided tours. Our average number of people per tour is 4 or 5 people. The top number of people would be 8 per tour guide. And so it is a very small group. If it is not safe on the street, we're going to be on the sidewalk. If it's not safe on the sidewalk, we'll be on the street. Just depending on wherever it is safe, that's where we will be. Of course, within the law, but as far as the law is concerned right now, we're legal on the sidewalk or the right-hand side of the road. So we want to be safe. We want to make sure our people are safe. We've been operating for 13 years up in Door County. We do over 100 people every few days in Peninsula State Park. We have never had a claim against us. We have plenty of insurance.
Is there any training before the tour?
Yes, yep, definitely.
How long?
Up to 30 minutes, typically, depending on how many people there are on our tour, yeah. And how quickly they catch on. Some people, it takes 30 seconds. They're pretty quick, but others it takes longer. So, yeah.
The other question I have, Jim, is actually for you. Personal assistive mobility device. You defined that as Segway, but doesn't that open up other things?
Yeah, well, it'll stop someone from like a hoverboard just
Right.
My point.
put on there.
Yep.
I can
that's my
answer
point.
that actually, if you might.
Don't go ahead.
As far as the personal mobility assistive device, it has to have a wheel circumference bigger than what a hoverboard has.
Okay. Do we currently let scooters in our bike paths?
Right now, it is, the way the language has written, is that it doesn't currently, it's bicycles, right now it strictly prohibits the electric assisted mobility devices. But as far as like skateboards are prohibited because they're considered playthings.
Right.
I guess we've talked in the past about like the motor scooters, and those aren't defined in the statute currently. Like they're not considered electric. Like Nick had said, from what I've seen, the electric personal assistive mobility device is very specific to, they're referring to what a Segway is. But yeah, I would say now like skateboards aren't allowed.
Right.
Mopeds or motorized devices.
Right. I'm actually talking about, and again, I don't mean to use or give a free commercial, but rascals, those type of things are allowed or disallowed in bike lanes.
You mean like, I don't know what a rascal is.
Oh, yeah,
you mean like the push.
my grandparent would be riding a rascal. Let's put, yes.
Oh, okay.
Yes. Sorry, I was trying to be delicate. But
Yeah, we haven't prohibited those in the current statute. I know we've talked about it in the past, and I know so I would say right now they're not prohibited, but we've talked about whether we should or shouldn't allow them. I know the police department in the past has said they thought that maybe we should allow those in the bike lanes because where there's not a sidewalk, you see them in the road basically. So maybe the bike lane would be a better place for the road. So we don't have anything that's, so I guess to answer your question, they would technically be allowed because we don't prohibit them. But we do prohibit like motorbikes and things such as that nature. So as far as, I was just looking for the language here. So currently it says no person shall operate electric personal assisted mobility device, which is basically a Segway, a motorcycle, a motorized bike, moped, or any other type of motor vehicle in or upon a designated bike lane, except as may be necessary to merge into the lane before turning at or when crossing such bicycle lane and intersections for purpose of egress to properties adjacent to the roadway or utilize the legal parking lane or space. So yeah, it's basically stating there that, like what you're referring to is, I would say it's allowed because it's not prohibited.
I guess I'm just a little bit leery of allowing segways in bike lanes because A, they're an attention getter. My fear is we're gonna have traffic going down the street on High in Algoma, if that's the proposed route going, and rubbernecking, and we take out parked cars, which becomes a safety issue. You yourself admitted to this point, it's only state park that you're in, up
What's
in
that?
Door County? You're just in a state park?
Oh, no, we have 20 different locations.
Oh, so are you in
That's
any
our
other
number one tour.
semi-urban area? I mean,
Yeah, we have tours. We have 3 different tours in Green Bay, a few different tours in Sturgeon Bay. We have a tour in Manitowoc, and we're adding a tour in Neenah, in Oshkosh, and Appleton.
okay, so begs the
there's-
question, are you using bike lanes in all those locations?
No, we have not done that at all. We haven't had a need or interest in that. And,
So,
and even
uh,
here, I'm not sure if we're going to be using them so much.
Okay, well then you obviously foresaw my question, which is why make Oshkosh the proving ground for that.
So I guess from a staff perspective, our thought on it is that if they're not in the bike lane, they can either use the sidewalk or the side of the road. They're either one. So, whereas so if you're not in the bike lane, what they're legally permitted to do is ride on the right side of the bike lane, which is basically on the right, in
Right edge of the
direction
road,
of traffic.
right.
So they're a little more protected if they were in the bike lane. So from talking to, the police chief and our parks director, when we all talked about it, he actually stated he would prefer to see them in the bike lane because he thinks that would be safer than riding next to the bike lane in the road. And I know that the Parks Board took this up at their meeting yesterday, and they're in favor of allowing them on the parks and the Parks Road and the Riverwalk. And I know Bike and Ped will be probably discussing it on Thursday as well. So that's kind of where this came from, is when we were talking about where they're allowed, then the issue of the bike lane came up, and well, should they or should they not be allowed in the bike lane? So I guess if our feeling is that's a safe place for them, but if they're not in the bike lane, then they're allowed either on the sidewalk or the side of the road, either one, just similar to a bicycle.
Oh, okay.
Which, in that, we've talked about in the past too, which is kind of an interesting dynamic. A lot of cities don't allow bikes on sidewalks, but in Oshkosh we do, so.
Which is an argument for keeping the Segway on the sidewalk because arguably people are accustomed to seeing bicycles on the sidewalk, whereas they may not be.
Yeah, I guess
I mean, it could go either way.
yeah, I don't see it as any worse than riding a bike in a bike lane, or, you can ride the Segway on the side of the road, or you can ride it, if we want to recommend that. They haven't finalized a route, but we've got the planned route. And so anyway, our thoughts for bringing it here were, it's good, number one, to get this out that, everybody internally is pretty supportive of them doing these tours. So so they'll probably be doing these tours. So it's good to get the message out that this is going to be probably coming this summer, number one. And then number two is like, do we want to leave them prohibited in the bike lanes or not? I guess so that when, assuming Nick gets all this through, then he knows if they can or can't use them. So
Then, is it gonna be so stated, that they have a choice then? If there's a bike lane, but if they want the sidewalk, they may ride there?
well, right now they're allowed on the sidewalk or the side of the road, so there's nothing
But
prohibiting.
I mean, you're not restricting that.
No, no. So really the question is whether they're allowed in the bike lane.
I guess,
Oh, sorry, Ben.
I guess personally, I'd prefer to see them have access to the bike lane rather than be on the side of the road. I think the bike lane is probably a safer entity than the side of the road. And if if the officers feel comfortable that they can properly enforce it, I don't see it being any more dangerous than riding a bike in the bike lane. And preferably, I think riding the Segway would be safer in the bike lane or the sidewalk than occupying road space.
Well, then are we going to limit them to using bike lanes and only bike lanes if they're on the road? But see, that's the argument he just made. Again, correct me if I'm wrong, Ben. I mean, if we're gonna have them on the road, they should be in the bike lane, but if there's no bike lane, he himself said they're gonna be on the road or the sidewalk, whichever is safer. And if there's a daycare center, with 20 kids going down the sidewalk, that forces the Segway onto the road in an unsafe condition by his own argument. And I think we can all agree to that. So we gotta find a home for them, whether it's the street or the sidewalk. And I'd prefer to remove the uncertainty and force them into one spot or the other so that there's some predictability out there for people driving their cars up and down our streets. They're used to seeing bikes, they're not used to seeing Segways. That's my fear.
Well, you're not going to be able to force them one way or the other. The option is whether you allow them to use the bike lane in addition to the sidewalk and the street or not. Because if you restrict them from the bike lane, then they are, by state statute, they're allowed to use either the road or the sidewalk.
Right, and my hope is they're going to use the sidewalk, which I think is probably the more reasonable spot and where people are going to expect to see them, as opposed to the bike lane, which alleviates some of the traffic concerns as well, left-hand turns, those type of things. So,
Am I assuming that you'd probably be picking routes that have bike lanes on them? Or are you mapped it out exactly?
Yeah, I've pretty much mapped it out. I think some of you have the map there. I'm seeing it in your packet there. That is a preferred route, a basic route. Like I said earlier, I want to go where it's safe. I don't want to go places where it turns out, oh yeah, this is, we've had a close call here. It's not a safe place for us to be. I want to be able to go to the next road, or if maybe the city is taking out a driveway or something, even the sidewalk, they're doing work on the sidewalk. I want to have an options. I want to be able to take care of my people as best as possible. It's better to have less restrictions than more restrictions, because I know that my tour guide that I've had at least for, I believe, 8 years, he knows what's safe for the people, and he's not going to put them at risk. So if he can at all help it.
So,
and the more options, the better.
according to this map, you're running up North Main from the river to Irving, which is the heart of the downtown business district. I can't imagine that's terribly safe from a traffic perspective or a sidewalk perspective.
Got the extra wide sidewalk, so.
Yeah, until somebody steps out of a storefront and there's a Segway right there.
And another thing is we go at a safe speed, and so we can go slower than a person walking, or almost the speed of a bicycle. Not quite. Bicycles go a lot quicker, and so of course we're going to be going slower on the sidewalk. We're going to be going at a safe speed. Their tour guide is there always to check. Is there somebody coming out of a storefront, watching for that kind of thing, coming out of a car or whatever. So our tour guides are good.
So is it a leader and a follower from a tour guide perspective?
Not fully, no.
Okay.
The tour guide goes from the front to the back, depending on where they're needed.
Okay.
Often, I did tours for a few years when I first started out, and I might sometimes say, okay, this is a good stretch. Stop at the corner, that kind of thing. Just so I can spend more time with somebody that might be struggling with the Segway or whatever.
How many people are going to be in a group?
Up to 8, but our average is 4 or 5.
I guess the thought in the bike lanes is if they're in this, if the sidewalk, if for whatever reason they can't use the sidewalk, then, from a staff perspective, we think then the bike lanes would be the next best alternative, and then the road would be, the third alternative. So it'd give options. That's the thought we had, is just give another option for somewhere that they could ride them, so. And I've looked at, the communities, I've looked at Appleton and Neenah, and they haven't, although they're not addressed specifically to bike lanes, they've pretty much, from what I've seen in the conversations they've had, they've decided to not regulate them any more than the state statutes.
Yeah, and actually, this is the only place I've ever found in northeast Wisconsin that has any restrictions on the Segway, other than the state statute. So I was surprised to see it.
Anyone else with a question or a comment? I believe we still need a second on this. One last call for comments, questions, or concerns. Call the roll.
Stefanik.
Aye.
Weinschneider.
Aye.
Becker.
Nope.
Haas.
Aye.
Ross.
Aye.
Szynski.
Aye.
Carried 5-1.
Which brings us to staff statements.
I don't have a lot this month, although I'm anticipating there'll be more coming for next month, because the Bike and Pedestrian Committee is going to be meeting on Thursday of this week to discuss their recommendations for bike routes this coming year. So I assume there'll be some bike lane discussions that we'll be having in the upcoming meetings to see if there's additional locations for bike lanes. So that will be upcoming. The only other two things I had were an update. I know that I think Mr. Szynski's been asking about the 9th Street. I did check on that. They're thinking that we'll have a report sometimes towards the end of the month. So once I get that, then we can kind of take a look at that again and decide what direction to take. And that was in regards to a potential road diet or something of that nature from Ryko to Knapp. We were waiting till we got that report. So within a month we should have something, and then maybe we can talk about that some more. And then I started working on the annual accident report, which I usually get done around June. So sometime in the next couple months I'll have that out as well.
Anyone with a request for agenda items for the next meeting?
Yeah, I'd like to, if maybe you wouldn't mind, Mr. Collins, or somebody from the police department for our next meeting, the bike lanes and one-way street issues around campus are quite bad as far as being patrolled and I think student awareness. So maybe we could get some ideas for next meeting as to maybe an educational program or something, or enforcement in that area, because it is quite dangerous and spring's right around the corner.
You mean the bikes riding in the wrong direction?
Yeah, bikes in the
I've-
wrong direction.
Since he brings it up, I do recall seeing that happen a few times, yeah.
Especially, on graduation, even cars on the one-way streets is very bad, graduation day.
All the cars drive the wrong way?
So, I mean, just kind of an assessment of maybe some enforcement policy over there.
Yeah, we definitely could talk about that. I think so he left, so.
A lot of times, like, the bike will be going in the bike lane, and then you got somebody else in a bike coming at you the wrong way.
Yeah, I know it came up, probably 2 years ago. That might have been at a bike and pedestrian meeting, but I know that one of the, and I can't remember if it was who it was, but one of the sergeants or the officers had said that they were aware of it, but they didn't really enforce it at that time. But if it's getting worse, then maybe that's something that we need to ask them to take a look at. So I'll ask them to come and discuss that at the next meeting.
Anyone else? Future agenda items?
I was talking prior to the meeting in regard to on the intersection app and 20th. going east on 20th, the pedestrian beacon is blocked by I believe it's a no parking sign. So it kind of helps gauge as you're driving if that signal is going to be turning anytime soon, as you see the red flashing, but you can't see it at all when you're driving on that street towards the east.
Okay. Yeah, that's something we can address pretty easily.
Which brings up another point. I'm assuming there's going to be some effort made to, once the weather gets warm enough here, knock wood, that we trim some trees and such around signage.
Sure.
There's a few hidden signs around town that I've noticed over the last couple of weeks.
Yeah, I mean, if you notice anything, just let me know, and I usually get those. I mean, the issue with trimming trees is if it's on the terrace or if it's on the public right-of-way, then our parks forestry division can go and take care of it. If it's on private property, then sometimes we have to notify the property owner, and then they're supposed to take care of it. So that, it depends type of thing. If it's in the right-of-way, it's easy, we'll take care of it. If it's on
Right.
private property, then we have to send them a notice and go that route. But our Public Works Department generally does the noticing.
Anyone else? Seeing none, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Meeting adjourned.